Your Creative Push, episode 295.
It's all about freedom, and it's all about what you can do to create your art. How can you monetize your passion and have freedom?
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Troy Plota. Troy has been an award-winning professional photographer for over 30 years. His work has appeared in top magazines including Vanity Fair, GQ, Rolling Stone, and many more, and his advertising work has also appeared on dozens of billboards in New York's Times Square, as well as on the Vegas Strip. And Troy's latest creation is the digital sharing platform Plotaverse, which also features his award-winning app, Plotagraph. And he comes on the show today to talk about those two things, and how he is always trying to push the limits of technology and the importance of having the perspective of an artist while creating software. Troy talks about how challenges and contests have grown and matured the Plotaverse community, and how he helps photographers and visual artists with monetization. He also talks about how he was able to get 4 million downloads for Plotaverse, as well as reaching out to his competition and realizing that they all have very similar stories. He also discusses the significance of motion art and why traditional artists might want to consider adding motion to their art. And finally, Troy talks about some of the difficulties that he is seeing other photographers having as technology continues to change, but maybe they are not willing to change as well. This was a great conversation. It was definitely heavily weighted in discussion about Plotagraph and Plotaverse, but we really get into some interesting topics towards the end that might help creative people to think in a different way, even if you're not a photographer, exploring new ways to get your stuff out there, but to also get out there yourself. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Troy Plota. Troy, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you, Youngman. Appreciate it so much.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm very excited to get into the things that you've been creating, because I think you come from a very different and unique perspective, and you're putting things out into the world, especially for photographers, that will really help them out. But before we do, I was hoping that you could kind of tell us how you got to the point you are today, creatively speaking.
Sure, absolutely. I started shooting when I was 13 years old, and I don't really remember too much before that. I just always had a camera in my hand, been a photographer. And I was kind of like the guy in high school who I was, a photo editor for the yearbook and newspaper, and anything that I could do to be in the dark room and to be shooting was great. I wasn't necessarily scholastic, I was definitely more on the creative side. So, but just from the moment that I picked up a camera, I just really loved it. And it's been my connection to the world. And as kind of time went on and my career went on, I really love to push the limits of technology, as computers came up and Photoshop came in and digital and all these other things. I just like that photography is with technology is kind of going hand in hand as we go. And a few years ago, as you know, I have Plotagraph and now Plotaverse, and we've been developing apps for a few years now, and all of which to create tools for photographers to bring their creativity next level and to help monetize their business and to help them compete in the world of video where a lot of our budgets have moved to.
What are some of the things that, would you say that separate some of your apps and some of your technology from other things?
Well, one of the things that we talk about as a company, as of right now, there's 8 of us, basically, most of which who've been my production crew. So for years, I've shot a lot of campaigns, shot ads for Vanity Fair, GQ, Rolling Stone, billboards in Times Square, shot a lot of celebrities. I could see the writing on the wall a few years ago as far as what was going on with photography and what happened with stock and digital, and the whole world of professional photography is changing so much. So we decided to kind of jump in, and I've had these ideas for a few years. And I said, listen, let's just do it. Let's go create these tools. So we pride ourselves on saying, what separates us is we create tools for artists by artists. We're not coders, although I do have some coding background. just enough, to know what I'm talking about when I'm speaking with my engineers and stuff. But we have the perspective coming from the artist as far as what they're going to need and how they like their tools to be set. And even for future, other apps that we're developing right now that will be within the Plotaverse suite of apps. And then the challenge side of things, and this is, I'm sure we'll go into this, but having contests and challenges for artists to go head to head on things really pushes the envelope on their creativity. Anytime you have a challenge or something kind of contest driven, it really kind of just puts that fire under you to kind of go next level on things.
Right. Yeah. I'm always challenging my listeners and people to challenge themselves and to take on those like big projects or to take on those, once a day type of things, especially when you get down to like the end of it where you're like running on fumes. A lot of times that's where you like dig the deepest and pull out things that you normally wouldn't.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And especially when it's set up right now, we have contests that is a point system. So every day we hand choose an image that's delivered to our community that they're able to kind of do whatever they want with, as far as like if they wanted to like Photoshop it a little bit or do, adjust it a tad bit and then bring it in, animate it, and then they go head to head and then they vote on the images for the day, as far as like, we base it on comments and likes and stuff. So we really see this as being the future. And there hasn't been really too many ways internationally where you can kind of like compete creatively and really show what you got, and motion art is a really great way to do that because there's so many different tools and so many different ways of expressing yourself as an artist. Even within our own platform, we have hundreds of overlays, soon to be thousands of overlays. So the way that you could take one image, animate it, put overlays on top of it, there's just almost, millions of different ways that image could come out. And you can see artists rising to the occasion and really getting involved with this. A lot of times within the creative community, sometimes some people say, well, it's not, it's everybody's perception on a piece of art or whatever it might be. And that's true. And that's great. But you could see whether it's in football or tennis or, any sports, it's much more accepted to go in as a challenge, to rise to the occasion, to, be the fastest runner or whatever it might be. And so what we're trying to do is, deliver these creative outlets, both within motion art, soon to be photography and video, where artists can go in and kind of show the community what they've got, and it's a great way to make friends and to support each other. And right now it's our community's building pretty quickly, and we love what's happening. It's so fun to watch.
Yeah, that is cool, especially when, if there's some sort of incentive, and everybody loves a good competition, but when there is that kind of incentive, that can definitely motivate people to really push the limits. Now, have you noticed, or have there been any situations where you have these contests and maybe something surprises you or makes you think of, oh, this is something I need to incorporate in the next app or the next update?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We go through and just seeing how people are animating images and I've made friends now all over the world. A lot of people in our community, we have, Indonesia to Italy to Russia to China. We have an international art community here, and they're animating images like I would have never even thought. It's like they're taking our tools and doing things that are things I didn't even realize could happen, so we're adjusting our tools accordingly, and we'll get a lot of feedback from the community like, hey, Troy, I wish you could do this, or what about this as a feature? And a lot of times we'll be like, yep, that's coming. Or, sometimes like, wow, that's a really great idea, and definitely see a use for that for sure.
Now, you also mentioned that keyword, that buzzword that gets people excited about monetizing their work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So monetizing, helping an artist to monetize their work I don't think there's anything more important, because for me, I've only ever been a professional photographer since I was 21. From 12 to 20, I started off as a dishwasher when I was 12, busboy, then waiter for years. And I just kept working my way up to getting photography jobs and shooting portraits or fashion or whatever it might be. And then finally opening my own studio when I was 21. But to monetize your passion is freedom. To have to go to that job or do that one thing just to keep rolling is just, there's nothing better that you can give an artist than tools on how to monetize their passion. And as artists, that's, we wake up and that's all that we can do is think about like, oh, what am I going to create? Whether you're a painter or photographer or videographer or whatever it might be. So I have a real big passion in helping artists monetize, especially photographers. And that's why initially we created Plotagraph is it's a way for photographers now to compete within the video realm. Initially, when you look at stock images, now the cost of a stock image is so cheap. Back in the day, you could get paid thousands of dollars for stock images, and now we're down to $20, $10, 99 cents, and then now we even have stock sites that have hundreds of thousands of images for free, and they're really good. So now you're like, okay, now what? It's a little eye-opening, So, but to be able to animate your still image and create a 4K video out of it, now, that's where there's a scarcity. There's a need for 4K video and soon to be 8K video. So with Plotagraph, right now we have it set up for 4K video, and we always have, and then soon to be 8K. So as things come out, we just keep trying to push the envelope to help photographers have that extra tool to monetize their images. Generation Z and the millennials, Instagram, you have all these apps now where you're just looking at thousands of images a day, and still images are having a hard time to competing within video. And so with Plotagraphs and our whole realm, as far as what we've set up right now in Plotaverse, it's all video based. But it, once again, it helps the photographer kind of compete within that video realm with another tool.
Well, you mentioned always wanting to be on the cutting edge, and you had a TED Talk talking about that specifically, the future of technology. As you are continuing to kind of be on the cutting edge, what do you see in the future now?
Motion art. And so a couple of years ago, I did that TED Talks it was titled The Future of Photography. And at the time, I had 2 production studios, one of which was almost like my skunkworks studio off to the side, where I was working on photogrammetry and doing 3D with cameras. And there was a lot of talk about VR and what's happening, and that was my big passion. I think it was 2013. I was doing 3D photography, and I have a 132-page keynote on the future of photography as far as even automation, photogrammetry, all these different things. I settled on Plotagraph. Sasha and I, my business partner, co-founder, and my partner in life, my girlfriend, we kind of had to make a decision. And I said, you know what? I think that, VR is still a little ways off. Let's go ahead and jump in and dive into Plotagraph, and let's create this tool for photographers to be able to monetize now, because this is something that could really help them. So, and I think I'm so glad that we did, because right now we're the top 5 recommended apps by Facebook for photo. So a lot of businesses that advertise on Facebook, especially small businesses, if they can't afford to go out and do production on a big video for their, pizza shop or coffee shop or whatever it might be, they're able to take an image and animate it, bring it into the video realm, put some overlays on it, and then, almost quadruple the attention that they're going to get off of their ad on Facebook instead of it being a still image. And so we're really super excited about that, and knowing that that's kind of the future, and at least that's our future at Plotaverse as far as, building this community right now. We have over 4 million downloads at the moment. And we're still less than a year on iOS. So we just we're building that and really kind of helping photographers, learn these tools and kind of dig into this other realm.
Now, it sounds like that was probably a big decision, maybe even bigger than in the story you told now with Sasha, making that decision. I was wondering if maybe you could take us back to that decision, because I think a lot of times a lot of creative people have these grand plans, or they have many plates that they have spinning or they want to spin. And it's really hard to kind of hone in and make that tough decision because so much of your time and resources has to go into that one thing. And you really do have to sacrifice other things that you might want to get to. So can you talk about a little bit about that decision-making process and how you finally pick the path to go on?
Yeah, the path. The funny thing is the TED Talks that I did at the end, I kind of talk about like when you have this hope or dream or postulate or whatever it might be, you put it out there and you want it to happen right away. You're like, I'm so passionate. I want this. And as artists, we always want things immediately.
Yeah.
So in this case, I had to listen to my own advice. And what happened was Sasha and I, we moved to Italy. And I was shooting a personal project over in Florence, Italy. And then we decided to move back to the States, and we moved back to New York. And I lived on and off in New York City for years. And we're like, okay, so we're going to dive in. We're going to get some investors with this photogrammetry and VR and shooting the 3D. Back then, it's Plotagraph 3D. So I had an investor, and we had everything set. We're going full steam ahead. A lot of what we were doing involved robots even and all these, high technology things that required kind of big investment to start rolling. So as we're going, our investor, several months into it, backed out on us. And we had bids, and we were introduced to, some different coding companies and stuff. And we went down with all of our bids from photogrammetry, which was like, honestly, like millions of dollars, and kind of going back. And the last thing that we threw in, just for the heck of it, is we threw this thing called Plotagraph in. And we're like, okay, this is kind of on the back burner, smaller project, And so when our investor backed out, we had the bid. I counted up how much gear I had. And I'm like, okay, I have all this gear, cameras, lighting, all this stuff. If I were to sell all of my cameras, if I sold all my lighting, I have usage coming in from big company, from jobs that I've shot and stuff like that. I said, we can pull this Plotagraph thing off. I'm not happy about it because I was really into the photogrammetry and at the moment and stuff at the time. So we did it. So I started selling gear to pay for the code. And then I kept selling gear and I kept selling gear. And then all of a sudden, friends and family would come in to help. And then big investors, as it started growing and we went into beta, I think we sold like $250,000 worth of software in beta within the first month. And and Sasha would look at me, she's like, so aren't you glad that we didn't start off with a photograph? I'm like, yes, I'm so glad. Because, just knowing that that's like a multi sort of year project. And on top of it, not only that, but it being able to get into the hands of photographers sooner than later. And this being something, that is usable now. And then, of course, last year, within a few months of releasing, we were the top app of 2017, and we're having celebrities using the app and getting featured by Apple and all these fantastic things. So a lot of the times you put something out to the universe, doesn't always come back exactly that moment, or it comes back in a different variation. Now, what's interesting is now that we have Plotaverse is actually coded to go to VR. So on a gradient, we're starting off with photogrammetry. We are going to have videos. We're going to have live stories, all of these things that we all know, but it is set up to go to VR in the future.
So you mentioned like the great success that you had, and I have written down here 3 million downloads. How? So maybe like you could describe how that exactly that happened. Was it just fortuitous, or did you put a lot of time and effort into the actual like marketing of it?
We're over 4 million downloads now, and it's a combination between iOS, Android that we released a couple months ago, and our desktop. And at the very beginning, we started off in order to use Plotagraph, it was $300, $299 for 1 year on the software. It's SaaS-based software on our desktop. And I was told that I was crazy, like, oh my God, nobody's going to ever pay for this and this, that, and the other. And sure enough, it's like what I was looking for is those first to market people, like, people who really knew what we created and where we're going with this and being able to do 4K and all that stuff. So we started there, and then we decided to create an app for the iPad. Because at the time, the iPad Pro had a really good processor in it, and we were like fingers crossed that it was going to even work because we weren't sure about the technology and if it had a fast enough processor. Well, sure enough, Apple's awesome. It worked great on the iPad, and so I which is great. And once again, it's another great tool on the iPad Pro for photographers to use and stuff like that. But as we're starting to launch, I asked my coders. I said, "Listen, guys." Going through the back end of the code, and I said, "What's this universal switch over here?" And I said, on the back on an Xcode, it says iPad, iPhone, universal. I'm like, what's this universal? They're like, well, that means it would work on a phone and an iPad. So I said, well, would this work on the phone? And they're like, no, there's no way it's going to work on the phone. We're doing too much with this, So I said, no, hold on. Do me a favor, do a release, just release it for the fun of it. Let's do a little beta and push the universal button. They did it, and sure enough, it worked. And we're all surprised. And we're like, oh my gosh, we didn't realize how fast the processing power was in the iPhones too. So with some modification, we did have to modify it a little bit to go backwards, down to I think the iPhone 6 or something like that. So we did some modifications. It worked on the iPhone. We released it first on the iPad, a few weeks later for the iPhone, and then we shot up to number 1 in photo video in the App Store. And then we remained there for months. And then we were lucky enough to be chosen as a featured app for the release of the iPhone 10. So we got a call from Apple, and we're like, hey guys, we only do this with a few apps a year, and we want to feature Plotagraph on the Apple Store app, the night that we released the iPhone 10.
Wow.
And so we're like, oh my gosh, of course, this is so cool. And I'm a fan, an Apple Mac fan from back in the day, from the early 90s. So I've had every Apple, Mac, iPad, iPod, whatever it is. So I'm just like, couldn't be happier. And so we signed for a certain amount of units to be released and initially it was for free during this promotion. And usually the year before, the app that they featured, they used that amount of units for 2.5 months during the feature, and they didn't run out. We depleted the units within 6 days. So Apple comes back to us. We're like, okay, let's do some more. So we just continued, and we got, I think at that time, over 1 million downloads within what we were doing there. And then we just kind of kept going with things. At the same time, knowing that we were creating Plotaverse, and we were creating this social community and this, this motion art sharing community. And so we're just, building up the, millions of people on the community. And so that's kind of how we've gotten to where we are right now.
Now, at any point when all of this kind of success is happening, and I guess like since you said since you were 13, being a photographer, has there ever been, has it always been unwavering or have there ever been moments of self-doubt or doubt in what you're doing or doubt in your art or anything like that?
Not really. When I was in high school, let's see here. Yeah, my parents were not happy with my choice of wanting to be a photographer.
What did they want?
And they were basically like, okay, you need to get a real job. Once again, I wasn't really scholastic in school, just kind of skated my way through. But when I found photography, I went from being like a C student to being, straight A's, photography class, everything that had to do with photography. And by the time I was a senior, 5 of my 7 classes were photography based, all the way up to assisting. One of my classes was the assistant of the photography teacher. Oh, wow. So I just absolutely always loved photography. And then after I graduated, at one point, my father, who's very supportive now, by the way, but at the time he said, yeah, man, so you need to get a real job or you need to get out of the house because this, he's a sheet metal contractor by trade, Vietnam vet, more kind of like John Wayne, tough guy. And I was kind of the artist's son running around with the camera in my hand. I said, okay, I understand. And so I moved out and I, packed up my car in the middle of the night actually, and just taillights went to Miami. And that's all I've ever really done is photography. Never wavering on being a shooter. At one point, I'm not sure how much photography experience you have, but like in the late 2000s, like 2008, 2009, Canon started releasing their DSLRs to include video. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, so maybe next level is I'm going to work as a DP, a director. I'm going to get into video. I really just love capturing and I love production and I'm really good at it. I love to run a crew and go on location and all these things I've been doing for years. So now we'll just do it with video and I've got my camera. So I started shooting video and I started working as a director and working as a DP. And this is very much what I've come to find out later was a trend. So when I was shooting, it just wasn't as much fun. It was a longer process. There was, the editing part of it. It was different. And I realized after a couple of years of both working as a photographer and then working as a director and DP also that I really just preferred photography. So when I decided to go in and create Plotagraph, I started reaching out to my competition. These are guys who I've never spoken to and who I didn't really know and normally probably would never take my call because in the world of photography, at least in my generation, I'm 48, we had a tendency to be very much like lone wolves. And we had our own production companies or we were working as our photographers and we never really talked with each other. So coming at it now as an app developer and in the software industry, I'm now friends with a lot of my competition, by the way. So, and which is really amazing. And it turns out we all have almost the same exact story. And I was hearing the same thing as, Troy, yeah, I'm working as a director, DP now, but it's just not the same. It's not the same as just capturing that image, that moment in time. And then now being able to even add, some more creative elements on top of it as looping content. So it's just been fun to kind of get to know my compadres. And I think the younger generations are more collaborative. They do work together and they do realize that it's not just a one-man show. So that's one of the things that I've been learning myself. And then I've been able to teach either other photographers is like, the way that digital works is it is handy to have a retoucher, and for years I just retouched my own stuff. I did my own editing. I was trying to be as one-man show as much as possible. And with my own crew, usually I had about 5 or 6, people in house and with my assistants or digital techs or whatever else it might be. So being an app developer now, it's kind of opened up my eyes to what's happening within the industry and able to share that data now with photographers so they can kind of be a step ahead.
I wanted to talk about motion art specifically too. There's a lot of artists here that, do visual art, but maybe haven't thought about kind of stepping into that idea of adding motion to their art. So I was wondering if you could maybe take them by the shoulder right now and kind of give them advice as to, or inspiration as to why they might want to start thinking about it, even if it is just for kind of an experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the numbers speak for themselves. And stills, if you have still content that's out there, what's changed a lot is, it's instead of being print based, where you have, the print magazines are falling off and even billboards now are digital. So if you're looking at an image on a digital screen, there's almost not too much of a reason for that to be stationary anymore. And I go out really far on this limb and I'm like, anything that you could do to get some kind of motion in there, because the way that things work now, even with, and especially within advertising, is there's a very short window to get somebody's attention. And if you can create some movement, and even if you don't want to move your particular painting or photograph or whatever it is, if there's something that you can put in there to capture somebody's attention as that extra little something, motion art is the way to go, whether it's a digital overlay or animating your piece, whatever it might be. There's a reason why Facebook's chosen us as one of the top 5 apps of the Facebook community. It's just because, they see the numbers for themselves, and, stationary still images are just not as compelling and don't capture the attention. And what I find is, once again, I'm going to say this, the younger generation loves surreal. They love anything that you're going to kind of knock them over the head a little bit, like, check this out, and they just love that extra little creative something. Now, guys my age, photographers, have a tendency. There are some traditionalists out there who are like, oh, photography and a photograph should never move. And, you get some really strong opinions on that side too. But the numbers speak for themselves as far as, for advertising and for attention and influencers. So the other thing is, if you're an influencer and you're trying to get attention on Instagram or Facebook or any other social platforms, the numbers speak for themselves. If you present motion art, you're going to get a lot more likes. You're going to get a lot more comments. I'm working with a company called Olaclip right now. And, these Olaclip is a company that creates lenses for the iPhones. And so I'm living in Maui now, and I'm doing this really cool project where I'm shooting lifestyle and landscapes and all this cool stuff. And, I'm doing a takeover of their Instagram account tomorrow, and basing it on the numbers that we have from GoPro. I did a takeover on GoPro's Instagram account. I think they have a little bit over 13 million followers on Instagram. And we over quadrupled the number of comments when I did the takeover compared to either traditional stills or even traditional video. There's just something about motion art that's special. It's different, and it's just getting a lot of attention.
And how easy is it well, this is kind of a 2-part question. How easy is it for somebody who has never really thought about, adding motion to their still art? How easy would it be for them to do that? And then how much easier would it be for them to do it with your help?
Oh, good question. It's super easy. The way that we've made our software and our apps is simple, and it's not based on a timeline like you would find in some 3D programs or After Effects and stuff like that. It's made basically, you just tap and drag in certain areas, and then you mask out what you don't want to move. From there, we even have overlays where if you didn't want to even animate your image, the overlays is just one tap, and you get to view, pinch and zoom, or click and zoom and rotate whatever you want the overlay to be. I was talking with one of our takeovers that we're doing, and our client was basically saying that his 13-year-old son does all of the animations for their Instagram account. This is a huge, millions of followers company, and they know that, they'll sprinkle in motion art, and it's going to double their engagement most of the time.
Just got to be careful with that child labor. That's all.
I know. Well, it's like my son just loves this. He has so much fun with it. And I'm like, cool, that's great.
That's awesome.
So we're putting out more tutorials. Right now on Plotaverse, we're working on adaptive streaming. That's going to be coming soon. It may even be out by the time this podcast releases. I don't know. But we'll have tutorials on there that we're posting, and then we'll have live tutorials too. And we're lining up both, for myself to do some tutorials, but also we have different members of our community who are working with us and ambassadors and stuff.
And we'll definitely link up at today's show notes page some resources for anybody that is interested, or at least interested in kind of checking that out and thinking about it.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Thank you.
Of course. And I also wonder, having spent basically your entire life as a photographer, what are some of the things that you have noticed that have been changing in the industry over the years?
Photographers are having such a hard time, man. I mean, I've befriended a lot of my friends now who, like I said, are competition, and they're just dying on the vine.
Yeah.
It's like people, these guys have been shooting 20, 30 years, and it's gotten to the point where it's really hard to monetize and to make money as a photographer. There's guys who have been begging for years. Come on, man, jump in the community. I'll promote you, whatever we can do. And they were kind of slow to get into it. And now they're just like, the work's just drying up, and there's so much stock that's out there that's available, and there's so many photographers who are working for not a lot of money per day, and so the guys who've been around since the film days are really struggling and have a hard time with it. So motion art now, I'm getting a lot of customers and a lot of my ambassadors who are like, oh my gosh, so-and-so company just reached out to me and they have a $25,000 project that they want me to animate their images. And these are guys who are working. One of our biggest ambassadors, a really good friend of mine, he's become a really good friend and a really amazing animator. He works as a plumber. He has a full-time job as a plumber, comes home, has 4 kids, animates all the time. He's really amazing. And now he's getting to the point to where he's actually getting close to being able to quitting his job, working just as an animator and probably making more money. So on top of it is, photographers now, instead of like maybe switching over and if they don't really have a love for wanting to direct or be a DP or whatever it might be, adding this motion art and learning these tools is definitely a way that they're going to be able to monetize their business and get back to those day rates what they're used to, because it's just not there anymore like it was.
Well, I think that's like you said, you like to be on the cutting edge of things, and I don't think people need to necessarily be on the cutting edge and like have their finger on the pulse of like what's gonna come next, but at least being willing to kind of move on, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
to not like get stuck in old habits or just wonder why, you can't make as much money or why people aren't looking for that kind of work anymore. It's because, the world's kind of moving on without you in a way,
Yeah. But as a photographer, it's just, we can't even imagine that would happen within our lifetime,
right?
Right. And it's happening fast and furious. It's just like, it's just going at such quick pace. And what's happening with the influencers right now and organically, it's fun and it's amazing. One of the things that's different about Plotaverse is Instagram was a great place back in the day. I really loved Instagram and we really built up a really nice community there. But now that the algorithms have come in and it's really making it hard for us to get attention and it's not real. It's not like you post something good in chronological order and your community sees it.
Right.
It's basically governed back now, so on our platform, the cream rises to the top and we don't have an algorithm that knocks out images that you post. And I actually personally curate Plotaverse myself. Every image, we have hundreds of thousands of images that I've uploaded. I personally, up to this date, I've curated every frame that's ever been seen on there. So if I see something really cool, image-wise, animation-wise, whatever it might be, I put it on the main feed. And it's all in chronological order. And we have no tolerance at all for trolls. Like this is truly an artist community that is supportive and, artists can be sensitive, and you get on these different platforms and you get people who are really talented and they step into the world of Instagram. And if you're just now stepping into Instagram, you're going to have a really hard time because back in the day, you can move up pretty quickly. You can get friends without the algorithms and you could kind of like, get your followers up. And right now it'd be really hard to do that. So we have a platform here for artists that you can move your way up. And if anybody comes in who has something negative to say, or they're just trying to rile things up, I have no problem with deleting them off the platform. I'll give them a warning like, hey, welcome to Plotaverse. And we don't really talk like that around here. And we really have a loving, supporting community, international community. And we're here really just to build each other up. And if they don't want to adhere to that, they want to ruffle some feathers, like, that's cool. Go hang out on Twitter. Right. go hang out somewhere else, and we'll just, take them off the platform and just move forward with our really amazing community. So that's kind of one of our policies that we have.
Yeah. Well, and it's a shame too, because I only got into Instagram like 3 years ago because of the podcast. But I always thought that, Instagram was, awesome. It was a bunch of sweethearts because I was comparing it to like, YouTube comments and Twitter comments,
right,
and
right.
like Facebook, and now like I guess everything kind of falls to the wayside. But I think it is important to branch out, even as like all this crap is going down with Facebook, and people know that they should kind of be jumping ship. It's hard to do that when you're so used to it and you don't know exactly where else to go. But I think it is important to find these like niche communities, like the Your Creative Push Facebook group, or Plotaverse, or whatever it may be. Even like decentralized communities, I think, are really going to be very important soon. But I think it is important to kind of branch off, and to be willing to kind of leave the mainstream things to find that niche community, and that especially that supportive community that is interested in not only like promoting themselves, but also, like you said, lifting each other up.
Absolutely. That is everything you just said is Plotaverse for sure. If you're in like the Facebook, the world of Zuckerberg and Facebook or Instagram or Google or Twitter, wherever it might be, these are like the giants, right? And we're not looking to have 1 billion people on our platform. I don't want 1 billion people on our platform.
1 billion's a lot.
Like, and if you go into the world of like, VCs and investors and everything's all about numbers, we're like, we're not about numbers. We just want a really great community. Of course, we need to make money, and we're a business, and we need to pay for our server costs. And we have a lot of aspirations as far as creating a lot more really cool apps for tools for artists to be able to monetize with and to be creative with. But we can do that on a gradient, and we can do that without 1 billion people. And once again, we wanted this to be a sanctuary for artists to go and to kind of be safe.
Yeah, I like that word, sanctuary. Well, and I think it all kind of stems back to that idea of numbers. Like people, especially creative people, kind of base their success or their, permission to continue to create or to call themselves an artist based on the number of followers they have. And I think you said it right. It's not about like the numbers. Like who cares? Like the numbers, it's the quality, it's the quality of people that are actually legitimately interested in your work, that are liking it because they like it and not because they're trying to get a follow back or something like that. You know what I mean? And I think it's a harder thing to find, especially when you're using those giants. But when you can find that loyal and supportive audience, that's what it is to be an artist. That's what you should be aiming for.
Right. No doubt. One of the things that we set up through Plotaverse is we don't count how many people you're following. This is like such almost like I call it like a middle school game. It's like, how many followers do you have? How many people are you following? We set up like how many followers you have. That's a great gauge as far as, something to shoot for and to see how many friends you have and followers, that sort of thing. But on the other side, we don't show how many people you're following. So if you like something, follow them, right? It shouldn't be based on this game. So, if you want your feed to look a certain way, go follow, 10,000 people. It doesn't matter, and it just base your feed on what's inspiring you. That's the way, that more of a creative mind works. And then our game that we set up is a competition on, hey, how cool is your art?
Right.
What kind of overlays are you doing? How good is your animation? How good are your points? And what did you think of that was outside of the box that got you that many more likes and comments that helped you to win that day to get those points? And what we do is at the end of the month, we add up the points, whoever won that month. So then we have a winner of the month. We're in month 3 right now. And then at the end of the year, we're going to have a winner of the year. We're going to have an annual winner too. And we're going to have a really pretty good, substantial prize for that person. So every month, so we have like 12 winners a year. And then, that one person who just hung in there and did a really amazing job, and they're really going to, get a cool prize at the end of the year. And so we're just going to keep going with this. And I think it's a great way for artists to engage with each other in a friendly, competitive, supportive way, like you would find in sports. And I think it's going to be a good thing for the creative community.
Very, very cool. And where can people specifically find the contest?
Okay. So if you're on iPhone, iOS, you can find us on the App Store at Plotaverse. And same thing with the Play Store. Just search Plotaverse and you can download us from the Play Store. And if you're on desktop, Plotaverseapps.com. That's where you can download our version for Mac or PC, and that's our Pro version. And all 3 or 4, I should say, platforms have the contest set up, and they're all connected.
Very cool. Excellent. And again, we'll have all of that linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/Troy Plota. Troy, we always like to end with what I call the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions, whatever they may be.
Absolutely. Freedom. It's all about freedom, and it's all about what you can do to create your art. And honestly, if you monetize it, how can you monetize your passion and have freedom? Because there's so much work out there, and there's so many things that you can do that's just special. It's that one thing that nobody else can do. And just, hold that in your heart, keep going, and just keep going for your passions. That's all I can say. And it will happen for you.
Freedom. I think of the
freedom. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Troy, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for talking about Plotaverse and everything else you got going on, and for inspiring us today. I really appreciate it, man.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it too.
My thanks once again to Troy for coming on the show and sharing his story and telling us more about Plotagraph and Plotaverse. Hopefully it made you think about different ways to put yourself out there, different things that you can do to your existing work when you're trying to put it out there and to try to get attention, to get eyeballs on your stuff. Explore ways to either remix your stuff or to repurpose your work, not only to get more attention, but also to come at it from a different angle, to start thinking about it in a different way and seeing how far you can push things and other realms that you can start dipping your toes into. On next week's episode, we have Alatar. Alatar comes back on this show for another killer episode that is going to really make you think about your creative process in a different way. We talk about The Miracle Morning, a book that was really a game changer for them, and something that I am starting to dive into as well. So we talk about that at great length, as well as a myriad of different topics. I always love my conversations with Al. If you haven't heard the first episode, definitely go back and listen, yourcreativepush.com/232, or we'll also have that linked up at today's show notes page, along with all the other goodies from Troy at yourcreativepush.com/295. But that's all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get to your creative passion. So go and get your work done, and we will be here for you next week if you need the push again. I love you all so much. Go get some amazing work done, and we will see you next week. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.